Hello students, welcome to this channel. Today I'm here to discuss the chapter The Last Lesson with you. It has been written by a French author, Alphonse Daudet. He lived from 1840 to 1897. He was a French novelist and a short story writer. This particular story was set in the scene of war between Prussia and France. Now, during this war, Prussia took over France, especially the districts of Alsace and Lorraine, and orders were passed that the native tongue of France, that is the French language, would not be taught anymore in these districts. Now, this story deals with the theme of lost opportunities. When we take things for granted, we feel, yes, there's plenty of time, and we are always in habit of postponing the most urgent things. We feel we have plenty of time, and at times we realize that there is not much time left. Also, this story deals with the theme of chauvinism, linguistic chauvinism. Now, what is chauvinism? Chauvinism is taking pride too far in something. Linguistic chauvinism means taking pride in language far to the extent that you disregard the other languages. That is linguistic chauvinism. This story deals with the theme of linguistic chauvinism also. Prussia had overtaken the districts of Alsace and Lorraine and were forcing people to learn German language instead of their own native language, French. As soon as the orders were passed, the citizens of Alsace and Lorraine realized their folly and wanted to learn French, but alas, it was too late. Now, going to the text, the author, as a boy, he was getting ready on one morning and was about to go to his school, but he did not want to go because he was dreading, he was scared of the teacher. He had not prepared his lesson. The teacher was supposed to ask him questions on participles. Participles is a topic of grammar. He was not prepared for it, and he did not know even the first word about that topic. Now, for a moment, he thought of staying away from his classes. He looked around. It was a warm, sunny weather. It was very attractive. Birds were chirping. At the edge of the woods and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. Drilling means they were marching. And it was very tempting for him to stay out. But still, he resisted that temptation and started for the school. Now, on his way, when he was passing the town hall, that was an important building over there, there was a bulletin board on top of that building, and there was a lot of crowd outside the building. He was wondering, what is the news? Now, he knew that every time there was a crowd outside, some bad news had come. And he knew it was some bad news. That is why people had gathered there. But he still controlled himself and started moving towards the school. Now, as he was going towards the school, he came across a blacksmith whose name was Watcher. He was there with his apprentice. Apprentice means someone who's under training. So he just told him, "Don't go so fast, bub. You'll get to your school in plenty of time." What he meant was there was no need to rush because there was plenty of time. He knew what the news was, but little Franz could not understand, and he planned to go there fast and sneak into the classroom in the hustle-bustle of the school. He thought that the blacksmith was making fun of him, but he reached there. Now, usually, when that little boy Franz used to reach school, there was always a great bustle. Bustle. Bustle means noise. So what kind of noise did he hear? It was the noise of the opening and closing of desks. Lessons repeated in unison. Unison means together. Very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better. It means the children used to put their hands on the ears to concentrate fully on the lesson. And the teacher used to be rapping his ruler on the desk, but that day it was a little different. There was no noise in the classroom. Boys and girls were sitting quietly and listening to the teacher. The teacher held the iron rod under his arm like this, and he was just moving up and down the classroom. He was not saying anything, and it was quite embarrassing for little Franz to go into the classroom like that. Now, through the window, he saw his classmates already in their places and Monsieur Hamel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his hand. Now, you can imagine what embarrassment he had to face because he was noticed by each and everyone that he was late for the class. He was expecting that the teacher would scold him, but nothing of the sort happened. Instead, Monsieur Hamel, the teacher, was very polite to him and he said, "Hurry up, my child, we were going to start without you." Now, he noticed many other changes in the classroom that day. He quickly jumped to his desk and noticed that the teacher was dressed up unusually. He was wearing a beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt and little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he would normally wear on special occasions or on Sundays. So he noticed that there was a change in the way the teacher had dressed up. There were other changes also. The whole school seemed to so strange and solemn. Solemn means grave, a bit serious. But the thing that surprised me the most to see was that the back benches were occupied by the elderly people of the village. Now that was unusual. Normally they wouldn't come for the class. Old Hauser with former postmaster and several others besides. So these men had occupied the back seats of the classroom. That was a little surprising for little Franz, and he didn't know what it would be. So while he was just wondering, while he was just thinking, what could it be? Monsieur Hamel mounted his chair and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used for little Franz, he said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you." Now that came as a thunderclap for the children. Thunderclap means a very surprising and shocking news. Now the announcement was made by the teacher that it was his last lesson. He would not be teaching them anymore. He said, "The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow." So the orders had come from Berlin that French language would not be taught anymore in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. Children of these cities would only be taught German. That was a shock for little Franz because he had not expected so. He had not even learnt his own mother tongue, and the time had come when he could not learn it anymore. Now what a thunderclap. Thunderclap means a shocking news. The wretches, that was what they had put up at the town hall, and now Franz understood that this was probably the news that had been put up on the bulletin board, and that is why there was a large crowd outside the bulletin board in City Hall. "My last French lesson. Why? I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn anymore. I must stop there. Then, oh, how sorry he was. He really felt sorry for not having learnt it and for having postponed everything because he thought there was plenty of time. Now he had all the feelings of regret for not having learnt his own mother tongue, and he felt terrible that he, being a French national, could not read or write in his own mother tongue. My books, that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry, and his grammar, my history of the saints were all old friends now that I couldn't give up. And Monsieur Hamel too, the idea that he was going away, it just upset him to an extent that he forgot how he had disliked his teacher before. He had always thought that his teacher was a cranky old fellow who was bent upon teaching French, and he did not want to learn French at all. His books of French, his books of grammar, they were all so precious to him at that moment, and he regretted each and every minute of his life why he had not learned French language. Poor man, it was in his honor and the honor of the last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes. Now Franz understood why there was a changed atmosphere in the school. The teacher was unusually dressed up because it was his last day, and the village elders had gathered there to pay their tributes to the French teacher who had put in 40 years of glorious and faithful service to the school. That was a tribute to the teacher. They had come there to pay their respect and give him their thanks for his service to the school. Now imagine a teacher had been working there for 40 years and all of a sudden he was asked to discontinue teaching just because Prussians had taken over. So that was a sad news. Now while Franz had been thinking all this, suddenly the teacher announced his name and wanted him to speak about the participles. Now Franz tried his best. He put in all his efforts and he wanted to present himself to be the best on the rules of participles. But he got confused on the first word itself and he could not recite a single word. How bad he felt. He felt that how is it you pretend to be Frenchmen and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language? This is what the teacher told him. He did not scold him. He said, of course you will feel bad that you don't know how to read or write your mother tongue. But he just comforted him by saying that you are not the only one to be blamed for all this. He said, your parents are also to be blamed for this because your parents preferred you to go and work and earn money instead of going to the school and learning. And then he went on, one after the other. He said, it's not only your parents, but even I am to be blamed for all this. So what he wanted to take the blame for was that whenever he needed a holiday, whenever he wanted to go out and do fishing, he would send the children on one pretext or the other. At times, he would send them to water his plants in the garden. So he said, we all are to be blamed for everything. And we Frenchmen are in habit of postponing things, thinking that there is plenty of time left. But now the opportunity has been lost and you will not get time to learn this language anymore because the orders had come from Berlin that German would be taught instead of French. Now Monsieur Hamel went on to talk from one thing to the another. He started paying a glowing tribute to the French language, and he said it was the most beautiful language in the world. Now that is a real big tribute to the language. He said that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical. So we must guard it among us. What does he mean when he says we must guard it among us? He meant that we must secure this language. And how can we do it? It's only possible if they spoke to each other in French language. And never forget it, because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. It means that the people of France were under the suppression of Germans. Now, as long as they were enslaved, they had to learn German language, but they needed to fight for their freedom. With this line, the author meant that if everybody spoke to one another in French language, that will keep reminding them that they belong to the same country. And this reminder would keep them united. So as long as they were united, it was easy for them to fight for their freedom. So he advised each one of them to hold fast to the language. Then he opened a grammar and read as our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. Why did it seem easy? Because everybody was paying full attention to the lesson. And the teacher was teaching it with so much of patience. He had probably never explained things so well. He wanted them to learn everything on that last day. He wanted to give his best in one stroke and just stuff up their minds and brains with French language. Oh, how the teacher wanted them to learn French language. Alas, it was too late. Now, after the grammar, they had a lesson in writing. And that day, Monsieur Hamel had copies for them. He had brought in some notebooks and he wanted them to write in a beautiful handwriting, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. It looked as if those words were the flags of France. And they were all concentrating, not taking notice of any disturbance. Even the beetles came in. They were not noticed. Nobody took any interest in any kind of distraction. And suddenly the pigeons cooed. Cooed means they came and produced certain sounds. And very, very low. And I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? This is an important line from examination point of view. And what does this mean? It means that you might be able to control somebody physically with force and your physical strength, but you cannot govern the minds of anybody like that. So what he meant was that they could not force the pigeons to sing in German. That means they did not have any control over the minds of the people of France, because from their heart of hearts, they loved their mother tongue only. They might be forced to learn German, but they could never be forced to love German language. Now, whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw Monsieur Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Gazing means looking. So whenever Franz looked up, he saw Monsieur Hamel, the teacher, who had put in 40 years of service. He used to look from one thing to another. Probably he had so many things going on in his mind, and he wanted to capture each and every sight of that classroom in his mind forever. He wanted to carry on with his memories forever. He had been there for 40 years. Imagine, it's a long time. And only the desks and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller. That means the scenery around had been the same. Only the benches and the desks had been worn smooth. That means only they had been used. Everything else remained the same. So, but he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. And after writing, he said he could hear the babies chanted their ba, bee, boo, boo. These are just the noises produced by the babies or the birds outside. So down at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands spelled the letters with them. So everybody, including the village elders, they were trying to learn the language as much as they could. And all of a sudden, the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus, and at the moment, the trumpets of the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our windows. Now Monsieur Hamel stood up. He knew the time had come for him to go. So he just stood up and tried to say something, but his throat was so choked with emotions. He was so full of emotions that he could not utter anything. He started with the words, "My friends, I," but he could not speak. He was so full of tears that he could not express his emotions in words. And suddenly he turned towards the blackboard and said, and all he wrote on the board was, "Viva la France." Viva la France means long live France. So that was a tribute to the country where he had put in a long time of service and tried to teach the mother tongue. He stopped and he leaned his head against the wall. He was obviously full of emotions, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. So all he did was just waved with his hands and telling all the children and the village elders to go out of the room, and school is dismissed, you may go. So he told the students with a heavy heart and just moved his hand. He could not speak anything, and he just said, "You may go, school is dismissed." So he wanted them to leave. So with a heavy heart, he made the children and the village elders depart the classroom, and he felt very sad about it. That's all about the story. Thank you, children. We'll be back with the question answers in the next video.